Do you see that these are the same properties that we had yesterday, only they are turned around the other way? Yesterday, we expanded our logarithms. Today, we're going to condense the logarithms. What does condense mean? Make smaller. I'm not exactly sure what you said. Condense means make smaller. And again, the reason we're doing all of these things is so that when we get to tomorrow, we can actually solve these log equations. We're going to use these properties to solve equations, but first we have to understand what the properties are. Do you see a plus sign right there in the middle of this problem? That means we're going to use the product rule, and the product rule changes a plus sign to multiplication. I'm going to condense it to one logarithm. There it is. Condensed to one logarithm using the product property. Instead of adding two logarithms together, we multiply the 7x. It all stays base 8. You do not have to put the parentheses. It kind of helps it look a little bit better, but it's not required. Again, we have plus signs, so that is the product property. Log base 6 of x times y times 5. Now that is not the traditional way to write that. Anytime we have a whole number with some variables, where do we put this whole number? You put the whole number in front, and it's also traditional to put the variables in alphabetical order. Property. Which property is this going to be? If it has some negative signs, this is going to be the quotient property. So, log 5, there's going to be a quotient. The 2 is going to be on top. The x is going to be on bottom because it is being subtracted. The y is also going to be on the bottom because it is subtracted also. That is the quotient property. You don't look confused. Okay, before I use my properties, it is easier for me to distribute that negative. Negative times positive makes this one negative. Don't know why my board is blinking. Okay, why did I make a quotient there? Why did I make a division? Because I have some things that are subtracted, and so x is going to go on top, and the y is going to go on bottom because that is subtracted, and the 5 is going to go on the bottom because that is subtracted. That's not the usual way to write this. You would put the 5y on the bottom. You would put the 5 first. You don't look confused. Okay, on this one we have subtracting sign and adding sign, so we're going to use both the quotient property and the product property. Where's the 5 going to go? On the top or on the bottom? This is adding, so it is not divided, it is multiplied by the x. The 5 goes on top because this is an addition sign right here. Again, I think It's easier to solve this if you distribute negative times negative makes this one a positive. There's a negative sign in here, so there's going to be a quotient. The 6 is going to be on top. This has a negative sign, so the 10 is on bottom. This has a positive sign, so the x is on top. You always reduce numbers if you can. What does 6 over 10 reduce to? This divides by 2, and this divides by 2, so the final answer is 3x over 5. You always multiply out numbers or reduce numbers as much as possible. Uh-oh, this one looks ugly. This one's kind of long. Do you see that this has a number out in front of the log? If it has a number out in front of the log, I am going to use the power property. It's probably best to use the power property first. So this 3 is going to go back up here as an exponent. That's what the power property tells you. This 2 is going to go up here as an exponent. This 6 is going to go up here as an exponent. This 2 is going to go over here as an exponent. Now we have some addition and some subtraction, so we'll be using both of those rules. Log base 4. 2 to the 3rd power and x squared goes on top. This is a negative sign, so y to the 6th power goes on bottom. This is a negative sign, so 5 squared goes on bottom. But you don't leave 2 to the 3rd power. You can multiply that out. What is 2 to the 3rd power? 2 to the 3rd power is 8. What is 5 squared? It is 25. Does the 8 over 25 reduce anymore? It doesn't, so that's your final answer. Okay, we got another long problem. It's got some exponents in it, and so how do I know it has some exponents in it? Do you see this number in front of the log? This number in front of the log needs to go back here as a 1/2 power, and I'm crossing it off to show myself that I've moved it from out in front back over here to the power position. And so I mark this off and move it back to the power position. And the 4 goes back over here as an exponent, and the 3 goes back over here as the exponent. I have some subtraction signs in there, so I'm going to have a quotient. Do you know how to tell whether the number is going to go on the top or the bottom of my quotient here? Is 16 to the 1/2 power going to be on top or on bottom? Does it have a negative sign out in front, so it's going to be on top? What about 4 squared? 4 squared is going to be on the bottom because of this negative sign. What about x to the 5th power? X to the 5th power is going to be on top because that's an adding sign. What about x to the 4th power? Because that's a subtraction sign. What about 2 to the 3rd power? 2 to the 3rd power is on top because this is a multiplication sign. What is 16 to the 1/2 power? Remember that a 1/2 power is the same thing as a square root, so saying 16 to the 1/2 power is the same thing as saying what is the square root of 16. Do we know the answer to that? What about 2 raised to the 3rd power? What's that? 4 squared is 16. But what is 8 times 4 right here? 8 times 4 is 32. So back over here we have log base 3. And so what did that reduce to? What is 32 over 16 reduced to? That is 2. And this is x to the 5th power divided by x to the 4th power. What is x to the 5th power divided by x to the 4th power? Can you believe that ugly thing that we started with reduced all the way down to log base 3 of 2x? Do you see that if you can reduce it all the way down to log base 3 of 2x, if that's equal to some number, then it's going to be a whole lot easier to solve than it was in that form over there. I was wondering if anybody had that question. And so it gets to be x by itself because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's what x to the 5th power means. And then on the bottom I have 1, 2, 3, 4, x to the 4th power. That's what it means. And those cancel off, and how many x's are left? Just 1. And so that would be expanding the exponents. And when you do that, just 1x is left. So your worksheet will be due on